This presentation covers the Special Education Consolidated Federal Grant application with a focus on the IDB LEA Maintenance of Effort Eligibility Standard section of the application and the random data validation process as it relates to the eligibility standard. My name is Laura Salazar and I'm the Post-Award Compliance Unit Manager within the Federal Fiscal Compliance and Reporting Division. Please take a moment to review our disclaimer. It essentially states that the information that we're providing during the course of this presentation is based upon our current understanding of the content, and that the content is subject to change. And if you require legal advice, then you would want to seek legal counsel. The agenda for the training, we intend to share presentation goals. We'll be going over the BS 6016 fiscal compliance requirement schedule as it relates to the IDB LEA maintenance of effort for eligibility. We'll also be covering the BS 6016 eligibility standard random data validations, giving you an overview of that process and sharing some shifts in the validation process timeline. We'll also briefly be touching on the Federal Fiscal Compliance and Reporting WorkApp training sessions. What we hope to cover during the course of this presentation and to help with a better understanding is the revision and the reasoning behind the revision that was made to the BS 6016 IDB LEA Maintenance of Effort Eligibility Standard Schedule. In addition, we'll be highlighting the importance of aligning line 1A with the second page of the most recent final compliance review report. In this case, it's the 2022-2023 IDB LEA MOE final compliance review report. We'll be sharing the shift and the random data validation timeline. And we'll also be giving an overview of the validation process and acceptable documentation submissions. Let's touch on what is meant by the eligibility standard. IDB LEA maintenance of effort requires LEAs receiving IDB funds to budget and spend at least the same amount of local total in per capita or state and local total in per capita funds for the education of children with disabilities on a year-to-year basis. IDB LEA MOE is a 100% fiscal compliance requirement. Now let's take a look at the BS 6016 Fiscal Compliance Requirement Schedule revision. This schedule has been revised so that now it indicates line 1A, where you're reporting the expenditure amount for the most recent prior year, and line 1B, where you're selecting that the number that you're reporting in line 1A is coming directly from the second page of the most recent final compliance review report. In this case, it would be the 2022-2023 IDB LEA MOE final compliance review report. There are 4 test method amounts indicated on the second page of that report. You would utilize one of the 4 that was passed for what you're reporting for the expenditure amount for the most recent prior year in line 1A. You must select the checkbox in order to save the schedule, the checkbox indicated in line 1B, verifying that you have referenced page 2 for what you're reporting in line 1A. You will see a link to the revised instructions for this schedule indicated on this slide. Now let's take a look at the BS 6016 IDB LEA Maintenance of Effort Eligibility lines 1 through 4. Again, what you'll see here is line 1A, where you're reporting the most recent prior year's expenditure data, which is being informed by the second page of the most recent final compliance review report. In this case, it would be the 2022-2023 IDB LEA MOE Final Compliance Review Report. By selecting the checkbox in line 1B, you're verifying that the data you've provided for the expenditure amount in line 1A is being informed by the second page of the final compliance review report. This is an example of what the second page of the final compliance review report looks like. There are 4 test method amounts: local only, state and local, per capita local only, per capita state and local. You'll be utilizing one of these 4 test method amounts for what you're reporting in line 1A as the expenditure amount for the most recent prior year. You'll see a snippet here of the specific instructions for this schedule and an active link to the instructions that have been revised. In addition to that, just to note that the second page of the most recent final compliance review report is meant to be the baseline for fiscal year 2024 and is intended to be used when filling out the application. This is illustrating the alignment that we're looking for when we do our post-award compliance reviews of the Special Education Consolidated federal grant application, and also when we're conducting the random data validations. We're looking for one of the 4 test method expenditure amounts to line up with what's being reported as the expenditure amount for the most recent prior year in line 1A. For line 2 on the schedule, this is where you're reporting the current school year's expenditure amount for the services to special education students for the current school year. If you are reporting local only total and per capita for the most recent prior year's expenditure amount in line 1A, you also need to be using local total or per capita and what you're reporting for the expenditure amounts for the current school year. The same would be true if you're reporting local and state total or per capita funds. For line 1A, you would need to do the same in line 2, meaning that you would also need to be reporting state and local funds total and per capita as your expenditure amount in line 2. So there needs to be alignment in the type of funding that's being utilized between what's being reported in line 1A for the most recent prior year and what's being reported in line 2 for the current school year. In the event that what you're reporting for the current school year is less than what you've reported for the most recent prior year, then the third section of the schedule will be enabled. This is where you would choose an allowable exception as to why the amount you're reporting for the current school year is less than what you reported for the most recent prior year. There is an active link here to the IDB LEA MOE webpage where it gives in-depth instructions and information about the allowable exceptions that you can choose as justification as to why the current school year's expenditure amount is less than what's being reported for the most recent prior year. For line 4, this is the assurance of eligibility. So if you choose the first radio button, you are assuring that the amount that you've reported on line 1A, the expenditure amount for the most recent prior year, that you're utilizing state and local funds total and per capita, and what you're reporting on line 2 for the current year's expenditure amount is also state and local total and per capita. If you're choosing the second radio button, then you're assuring that the amount that you've reported in line 1A is local only total and per capita. And what you're reporting in line 2 for the current school year is also local total or per capita. We'll now cover the BS 6016 IDB LEA Maintenance of Effort data validation process as it relates to the eligibility standard. We'll now cover the BS 6016 IDB LEA MOE eligibility standard validation. A time frame shift has occurred in terms of when the validations will take place. The validations will be completed January through March of 2025. This allows for finalized budgets to be determined. LEAs will be in office rather than reaching out during the summer when folks are out of office on vacations. This also will mean that the initial application and funding will not be placed on hold, and LEAs can amend their application and claim their final entitlements at the same time if they so choose. Here's an overview of the validation process. There will be a 10% random sample of LEAs selected each year. We will communicate with that 10% so they're aware that they're in the sample. The sample LEAs are contacted and they're asked to submit their current school year budget. FFCR staff verify data on line 1 against the test method amount indicated on page 2 of the IDB LEA MOE Final Compliance Review Report and request supporting documentation to verify amount indicated on line 2 of the BIA 6016. These are some important aspects of validation submissions. The supporting documentation must come from the local education agency's official accounting system. The documentation must indicate fund codes 199, 420, or 437. The documentation must indicate PIC codes 23, 33, or 43. The current school year and the name of the LEA must be present on the documentation. The documentation must match what was entered on line 2 of the BIA 6016. This is an example from the previous validation season of where we're matching the amount that's being reported on the special education consolidated federal grant application on the BS 6016 schedule, line 1 amount, with what is represented on the second page of the most recent final compliance review report. We're checking to make sure that one of the 4 test method expenditure amounts is what's being reported in line 1A. This is also an example of documentation that was submitted this last validation season, where we're making sure that the documentation that was submitted from the official accounting system, that the expenditure amount matches what was reported in line 2 on the BS 6016 for the expenditure amount for the current school year. You'll also notice that fund codes 199 and PIC code 23 were utilized. These are additional examples of what we're looking for with documentation that's submitted. We're looking for a current date. We're looking for the correct fund codes and PIC codes. These are some different scenarios where LEAs had to either amend their application or revise the documentation and resubmit it. The first scenario, if the BS 6016 line 1 does not match an expenditure amount indicated for one of the test methods on the second page of the most current IDB LEA MOE Final Compliance Review Report, the LEA must amend the BS 6016 line 1 so that it matches one of the 4 test method amounts that's indicated on the second page of the most recent Final Compliance Review Report. Another scenario is if the BS 6016 line 2, which is the expenditure amount for the current school year, does not match the submitted budget documentation amount, the LEA must either adjust the budget or amend the BS 6016 line 2 to match the budget documentation that was submitted. Another scenario, if the submitted documentation does not reflect the current correct funding and/or PIC codes and the correct school year, the LEA must submit revised documentation. In addition, if the documentation is not from the LEA's official accounting system, the LEA must resubmit documentation that is directly from an official accounting system. And the final scenario is if the BS 6016 line 1 and line 2, if the LEA's budget does not equal or exceed the amount expended in the most recent prior year, then the LEA must provide specific justification. This situation relates to line 3 of the BS 6016 schedule that outlines allowable exceptions. You can find more information and training material about allowable exceptions on the IDB LEA MOE webpage. This is an example of a validation that we conducted last validation season. You'll notice that the documentation that was submitted, the expenditure amount does not match what was reported for the current school year on line 2 of the BS 6016 schedule. There are two options here. Either the LEA needs to submit an amendment so that line 2 matches what is reported on the documentation that was submitted, or the LEA needs to resubmit the documentation with the correct expenditure amount so that it matches line 2 on the BS 6016. In this example, you'll notice that on line 1, the expenditure amount that's being reported for the most recent prior year is not being informed by one of the 4 test method amounts on the second page of the most recent final compliance review report. This LEA was required to submit an amendment so that the amount that's being reported in line 1 is taken from the second page of the most recent final compliance review report utilizing one of the 4 test method amounts. These are two examples of situations where the LEAs had to resubmit the documentation. The two that you see, example 2 and 3, these two examples are not from the official accounting system. So the LEA had to resubmit their documentation, and it was required to come and is required to come from the official accounting system. In addition, you'll see example 1, the wrong school year is indicated for this particular submission. So you'll want to make sure that's the correct school year when you submit your documentation from your official accounting system. I'll now share with you some training opportunities that are on the horizon. Once we identify our 10% sample of LEAs being validated this season, we will reach out to you directly and invite you to join us for a targeted technical assistance training, which will take place most likely in December, where we'll walk through the process of the validation and what we'll be asking you for in terms of the submission. In addition, we also, as needed, will schedule a technical assistance training where we walk you through how to create the alignment of the BS 6016 line 1 with the second page of the IDB LEA MOE Final Compliance Review Report. This will be a voluntary training, and we'll just reach out, and if you would like to take part, feel free. In addition to that, we have 2 different workout trainings on the horizon. We have July 9th, 9 a.m. to 10 p.m., and August 13th, 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. We'll be going over the Federal Fiscal Compliance and Reporting Work App launch and all the information that will be housed within the Work App and accessible to you. We'll now be covering some links to valuable resources. You'll see on this resources page that there's a link to the revised application instructions for the BS 6016, I highly encourage you to review those instructions prior to filling out that schedule on the Special Education Consolidated Federal Grant application. These instructions are also accessible through the eGrant system when you're filling out the application. There's also a link to the post-award compliance webpage where you'll find a lot of different resources related to the work that we do and the trainings that we've facilitated. There's the Federal Fiscal Compliance and Reporting website, which is an excellent jumping off point for looking at all the different web pages associated with all the different responsibilities of our division. There's the IDIAB Fiscal Compliance webpage, where you'll find the IDIAB LEA MOE webpage link. And then there's a wealth of information and training and resources on that webpage. In addition to that, there's a link to the IDB LEA MOE Compliance Guidance Handbook. Please feel free to reach out to the Post-Award Compliance Unit at our pac@tea.texas.gov mailbox if you have any questions or concerns. We are here to support you.